Go ahead and go live.
And we can just stay muted or something.
Well, except that it's going to be live on your YouTube, so it'll be two
Yeah, true.
talking heads.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to stop the screen share. Go ahead and go live.
And we can just stay muted or something.
Well, except that it's going to be live on your YouTube, so it'll be two
Yeah, true.
talking. There we go. All right. So it's good to have you on the show today. Aaron, thank you for being here. I'm going to start the broadcast.
Cool.
Let everyone in the room. Hi, everyone. This is Bill Free and Aaron Abke live on TGF TV for the Teachers of God Foundation. And it is my joy and honor to have Aaron on the show. This is a live webinar. It's a full hour for all of you. And we started doing this a couple of months ago because these are the presenters. Aaron is one of the presenters in the presenter series this year, and we have an amazing lineup of great teachers. Aaron is one, and he is our presenter for February for the presenter series. And for February, Aaron is going to, his topic or the title of the 4-week deliverables that he'll be doing in the presenter series on for the Teachers of God Foundation is Remember I Am. And each master class that Aaron does will cover 4 of the Vedantic yogas, the yoga of the Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. And as soon as Aaron told me what his topic was and what the deliverables were, I'm going, I want to go to that. So you guys are in for a treat and a half. He's going to have 4 deliverables. He's going to have for the first week, the deliverable is called The Silent I is the Real I. And I know the content that's underneath that is going to be extraordinary. And then the desirelessness is joy.
It's a
And
tongue
the
twister,
heart
huh?
of, pardon me?
So that word's a tongue twister, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a tongue twister, yeah. And then the heart of worship and who am I? Aaron Abke is an amazing, has an amazing backstory, and I just love what, I'll just give you a little bit about him. He was born and raised as a pastor's son in the Silicon Valley of California. He spent a year working as a full-time worship pastor at a church in San Jose until eventually, at about 23 years old, he felt called to leave his religion and pursue a deeper and more authentic spirituality at age 27. And Aaron had a dramatic spiritual awakening that changed the course of his life. And I'm sure we'll find out lots about that in this time together. Welcome, Aaron. I really appreciate having you on the show today in the presenter series and a new friend of mine and Teachers of God Foundation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you as well, Bill. It's always great to hang out with you and chat with you, and I'm looking forward to this series in February.
Yes. Yeah, I am too. I love how, I mean, we had a little bit of a riff for the last conference for Dialogues in Awakening, and I got to know you a little bit, and it's interesting that we both had a similar background. I had a Christian background for over 20 years. You had very much a Christian background, a youth pastor. I served with youth pastors, so I know what you guys did. And it's great to see another brother, Christian brother, that breaks free from that limited. I mean, it's a great start. It really was a
Yeah.
very good start for me, and I love a lot of the stories and the parables and the teachings of Jesus. And even Paul, he had a little, he was a little mixed up in some were the disciples. And thankfully, we have better information today with A Course in Miracles than Jesus's disciples had who were right with him.
Right.
And I love what you have sort of expanded into coming from that background, that you're not even limited to A Course in Miracles, and I'm not either, and I don't think anyone should be. I don't think we should be limited because to any kind of spiritual teachings that teaches us the understanding of our awakening, because it's just limiting our expansion. It's limiting God, or seemingly limiting, trying to limit God. And I just really appreciate that you're now bringing in these are they Sufi, Buddhist? What kind of what are these yogas traditions from? Where do they come from?
They're from the Hindu tradition or maybe Indian mysticism, Advaita Vedanta. I think they complement ACIM so well. And I couldn't agree with you more on that idea of not being limited just to ACIM, because whenever you limit yourself to anything, even something as seemingly perfect as A Course in Miracles, you can become a fundamentalist about it. And, we do see a little bit of that in the ACM community, I think, which is fine. But I think the text deepens dramatically. For me, it deepened dramatically by understanding other non-dual traditions such as Zen, Taoism, Advaita Vedanta. Truth is one, truth is singular. So if it's true, it's going to be everywhere. And by looking at other angles on truth, Advaita Vedanta, Zen, Taoism, Buddhism, A Course in Miracles becomes increasingly rich and deep. And the text really came alive to me when I was able to get outside of it a bit, just like the Bible did, actually.
Yeah, yeah. That's really interesting because it's like you play with it a little bit, and then you go out and you find these other non-dual interpretations, these metaphors and examples, and you go, oh, that's what that meant back there.
Right, exactly.
And of course, the mind is always wanting to take it literal, wants to take things literal because it's always very quick to either find ownership of the experience or some kind of projected blame or something right or wrong. It just automatically brings dualistic terms into situations, which is what a lot of the problems in the Bible were, that they took everything literally, and the things that were
Right.
meant to be mystical metaphors, they missed that altogether.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear people saying a lot of stuff in the ACM community sometimes, like, well, that's not what the course teaches. And, things like that. They get a bit dogmatic about it. And it's kind of like, well, how do you know if that's not what the course teaches? Maybe you're just not seeing it from every angle, right? And
Yeah.
even the course itself says, hey, forget this course, forget everything you've ever learned, come wholly, completely empty unto your God. I mean, I think that's as clear as you can get, that it's like we're never supposed to be restricted to any one single framework.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the idea that we are bringing the presenter series to TGF TV this year, this is a brand new idea that Susan Telford and I had, that we would just give our TGF TV audience a taste of the presenters that are coming in the following month. Right now, we're in a month with Lisa Natoli, my wife, who is a well-known Course in Miracles teacher. She has created several programs that one of her programs, the 40-day program, has been experienced by over 100,000 people. And she is doing the presenter series for the month of January. And the title of her series is called Enlightenment Made Easy. And when I told her what the title of your month was and the deliverables, she was so excited that it's like a companion to
Yeah.
enlightenment made easy, because enlightenment is made easy once you understand the idea. and you understand what it means to, I will step back and let him, or let presence or Holy Spirit or I am that I am lead the way. Once you have that understanding, oh my God, enlightenment becomes, oh, that's what enlightenment was. That's pretty, it's so simple we
It's so
miss it, right?
simple.
Right. Well, Aaron, tell me what's going on in your life right now. I've heard the tailwind of a new project that you're working on all year this year with what's his name? Alan
Mark Anthony Lord.
Mark Anthony Lord. And you guys are working on a 1 year project. What is that you're working on?
Yeah. Lately, my life feels a bit like I'm a circus juggler with 100 bowling pins going at once, but I love it. It's great. I have a master class going. I do YouTube content regularly and all the other social media stuff and interviews. And I just started a new program this year called Living the Course, which is really like a dream come true of mine. Mark actually approached me about it last year, and we thought it was going to be something much smaller than what it became. But it's basically just a program where we go live every morning. I went live about an hour and a half ago, 9 a.m. Eastern time. We do the daily lesson. We have about 250 people in the group. About 150 will show up live. The rest of the people are in different parts of the world, and they watch the replay when they wake up and all that. And then on Thursdays, which is the really fun part, we do a master class at 8 p.m. Eastern time, where we just go really deep into one of the key terms from the course. And each month is themed something. So January is the month of miracles. So we're going through miracle, love, and forgiveness, and just giving people like as deep of a context of kind of the framework of the Christian language that that ACIM uses to deliver its kind of non-dual teachings through. The language is can be a bit of a stumbling block for some people, and it's really just a pointer, right, to these truths that are wordless, timeless truths, and it uses the Christian framework to point to them. So we thought it'd be really helpful to give people more of the juice and the meat of ACIM in terms of the language it uses. So we do that on Thursday nights, and we go live every morning, 365 days in a row for this whole year.
Cool. That's a different approach. It's a big commitment for you.
Yeah,
It's a
it
big
definitely is.
commitment. Yeah, because I do the workbook lessons every single morning at 7:30 a.m. Eastern, and no matter where I am, I've got that commitment. It's a everyday commitment, but it's also a love, right?
Absolutely. That's what I've been telling myself is like, how many people, wake up this early to go to a 9 to 5 job they don't enjoy. And I get to do it for something that I'm absolutely passionate about. I have nothing to complain about.
Yeah, it's great. I love it myself, and I was very happy to hear about your program that you're doing. I like to take a look at it myself and just feel that vibe that you're sharing with your audience. And we get to feel the vibe that you're sharing with our audience. Tell us a little bit about this. Remember, I am. Tell us about the presentation that our audience can expect to connect with you in February.
So I did a series called Remember I Am last year on my YouTube channel that was really well received. And I sort of have had maybe like a part two kind of ruminating in my soul for a while, which is I'm very passionate about Indian mysticism, and it's another framework I really enjoy. And in the Hindu tradition, there are the 4 Vedic yogas, which are considered kind of like the 4 yogas that a yogi will pursue for self-realization. And they're the yogas of Raja, Karma, Bhakti, and Jnana, as you said in the beginning. And really, there's just 2 paths you could say, if we wanted to simplify it, to 2 paths you could adopt for self-realization, which we could say is the masculine or the feminine path. And we could say that Raja and Jnana are 2 of the masculine oriented yogas, and Bhakti and Karma are 2 of the feminine oriented yogas. Truthfully, the 2 are one and will lead to the exact same destination, kind of like 2 sides of the same coin. And this was something that I became really hungry for as a Christian, because, the Christian tradition really gave me bhakti yoga. I grew up as an evangelical, and in my church we had very little jnana, which is the word for knowledge. The Western Christianity is very lacking in spiritual truth and understanding. Very skewed, distorted belief systems about all the stuff we're familiar with. But they're really great in the department of worship to God, love of God, devotion to God. I mean, I spent my whole life since I was a baby in church through childhood, high school, college, 2 to 3 times a week in worship services with my hands raised, singing praise to God and loving God. And that was really my whole spirituality, was just this devotion to God. And there's some really great upsides to that. There was a lot of downsides to that, which was I didn't understand the nature of God. I didn't understand the nature of life or reality. Why am I here? What's my purpose here? What am I doing here? Christianity doesn't really give you good answers to those questions, but it tells you to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So it's like it has half the equation. And when I left Christianity, when I had my awakening out of religion, my heart was just starving for jnana. I wanted knowledge. I wanted Eastern philosophy. So I went headlong into Zen, Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism. And I spent, 6-7 years. I'd pretty much abandoned that whole side of my faith, the bhakti side of devotion to God. God became an intellectual pursuit. And that served me for a long time and was great. But eventually it led me to this place of, I want to say the word emptiness, but not the good kind in Buddhism, like emptiness of soul. Like I felt like life had no purpose or meaning anymore.
Yeah.
I actually became very, very depressed because I had all this spiritual knowledge, but yet it wasn't saving me. And it was really maybe 4 years ago or so, where I had an experience in kind of the lowest point, where it was like almost like I had a like not a flashback, but when people do inner child work and they have these memories that come surging back from their traumas they had been suppressed from remembering. It was like I had repressed my Christian upbringing for so many years because I had rejected it as that was not true. I don't believe that stuff anymore. And it's like I forgot I used to love God.
Yeah.
I used to worship God with all my heart. I used to cry and dance and weep in my living room. And I was missing that aspect of spirituality, that bhakti, that devotion. And so this series is really going to cover both paths, and each masterclass is going to be solely dedicated to one of those yogas, those Vedic yogas, beginning with Raja Yoga. The lesson's titled "The Silent Eye is the Real Eye," and it's about the practice of meditation. Raja Yoga is really the practice of using meditation and stillness and silence to realize the I am. And so all 4 of these lessons are going to be with a little bit of a twist of intertwining Ramana Maharshi's self-inquiry practice, because the one downside to all spiritual practices is that if it is adopted with the mentality of I'm a spiritual seeker who is doing an action to get a result, the result is enlightenment. That's ego getting in the way of truth because it's now trying to make some kind of exchange, right? A transaction happens of I do this practice, you give me salvation. And that will keep you out of salvation because you're still taking the role of the separate person. So all these yogas they can get you very far, but Ramana Maharshi was very kind of clear about this, right? They won't take you beyond the door to salvation unless you get rid of that I who does the practice. Yeah. So I'm going to be showing in each one of these yogas kind of the traditional philosophy of the yogas, and then how we can go beyond the limitation of them by using self-inquiry to actually extinguish that personal I. So we do that with Raja Yoga in week 1. I believe Karma Yoga is week 2. That's desirelessness is joy. Karma Yoga is kind of the philosophy of doing actions, doing service without any attachment to the outcome or the result, without looking for a reward or praise. Christ said, when you give to the poor, don't let your left hand know what your right hand just did. Yep. Don't let your ego take credit for it. That's kind of Karma Yoga. So we'll talk about that in week 2. Week 3 will be Bhakti Yoga, the heart of worship. And then week 4 will be Jnana Yoga, or who am I, which was the question that Ramana gave for the practice of self-inquiry. And so Jnana Yoga will go really deep into self-inquiry and kind of encapsulate the whole series at the end.
Nice. Wow, that sounds like a full month, man.
Going to be
And
action packed.
it is. It's going to be action packed, and it sounds like it's going to be a direct experience, a visceral experience of. I love how you're describing the thing that I used to also be a born again Christian. I used to raise my hands, and in that worship vibration, that frequency, you somehow lose yourself. You don't really understand what
Yeah.
you're how it's working, but you somehow lose yourself in the worship and the devotion, and you don't really know what it is. As you get lost in it, and you don't know what it is, and it's actually it's leaving the body mind
Yeah.
experience. And I never heard it described as the bhakti yoga, but I can't wait to hear how a Christian, a guy who has my own heart, would go into the play of consciousness and how that's related to our direct experience, and how the Christians actually do have that that transmission of connection with God, with their one self, that Jesus, I would call him the founder for
The
humanity. He's the major founder,
CEO.
before he shared it with all of us. But I also know that in the Course in Miracles community, there's not a lot of that. It's very intellectual. It's a
Right.
very
Exactly.
it's an intellectual. You go, oh, because when I first found the course, I'm going, oh, that's what that means. Oh, that's what that means. And you get so involved in the concepts of the course that you lose, and there's no connection to there's no worship, there's no devotion, until you become familiar with the course. Then devotion comes in, but I don't think worship ever comes in to the course. And I love hearing that you're bringing that in, because I really think it's a a path to connecting with God, with the Godness, with God nature, with God self, with the God that we all share and are. And I just love what you're saying here, Aaron. Thank you for putting these parts together. And then the other one, I don't even know about karma yoga. That's a new one for me. So what's the practice for karma yoga?
So karma yoga, I titled it "Desirelessness is Joy" because the idea of what it means to be a person, when we say the person in spirituality or ego, the person is really just a collection of karma that the soul has gathered. It's unmet desires. The Hindu tradition is the word is vasanas, which is like the latent mental tendencies that
Yeah.
are there because there's unmet desires. The mind is trying to grab fulfillment in the world. So the purpose of karma yoga is to eliminate the ego through service to others, non-identification as the doer of actions. Like you give to the poor or whatever, you do some kind act without any sense of an I who does it, without any sense of like, aren't I great? Or I wonder what my reward in heaven will be. That's what the ego is thinking, right? And
Yeah.
really that is devotion, right? To serve another person is to worship God in them. So it's just kind of another variation of bhakti.
Wow. Wow, that's why we get that's why being in service is so personally rewarding, because
Yeah.
first of all, we're giving to ourselves,
Yes.
but
That's what the
it's
course
that,
talks about.
right, yep. And it's also selfless. It's taking no reward for it. It's serving the greater good. It's serving consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really, the two paths will lead to one another if taken long enough. um, I agree with you very much that the ACAM community can be overly intellectual, or maybe just be missing that element of worship and love for the divine, which is really a shame, right? Because the course is just filled with the most poetically beautiful descriptions of God's love and mercy and his grace and his goodness. And that's how the course transformed me, was that reading those passages in the course, it was like whispering to some dead part of my soul that had been now resurrected and remembered, oh, I used to do this. I used to love God with all my heart. I didn't even need all this knowledge. I was lost in love. And the path of jnana, or knowledge, the intellectual pursuit of understanding God, will eventually lead you to bhakti. Because guess what? Knowledge is just the pointer. It's not the thing itself. God is love.
Yeah.
And so in ACIM or non-duality, there's a lot of this happening, worshiping the finger, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
eventually you have to go and see where the finger points, which is love. And that's how realization happens. The mind must be melted in love, because
Yeah.
love is the vision of God in everything. So until you get to that point, there's still some distance to travel, but those fingers will keep pointing you that way, as they did for me in the Christian tradition. I had all this love for God, but I had no clue who God was or what God was. And that love for God creates this burning curiosity to know, what is the nature of this love? What is the nature of this God I adore? And that led me to jnana. 6 or 7 years completely in jnana eventually led me back to bhakti, and the two kind of became integrated. So all that to say, it's, even though I see a lot of people, I would say the vast majority of people in the spiritual seeking community are very much kind of lost in intellectualism, thinking that the map is the territory. I don't see that as bad. I see that as, it's just a necessary part of the journey, is
Yeah.
that it's building that hunger in you that will eventually be born as that unrelenting devotion and surrender to God.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I love the understanding, the bringing the Hindu and the Eastern tradition and marrying it with with the course ideas, and then
Yeah.
also bringing in your love for truth, bringing in your love coming from the Bible. That when you find the Bible, first of all, when you find the Bible, there's just a thirst, there's a hunger for God,
Yeah.
and it shows up for you in your interest. I want to know what God is, and of course, you might, it's a bit of a cult that you are drawn
A
to,
bit.
because it's an incomplete, message that leaves you stuck. It, just like you were saying, it leaves you stuck thinking you're worshiping the Bible. I remember in the early days, if you could memorize verses, oh my God, you were
You were the
elevated.
holiest, yes.
Yeah,
A
you're
true
way up
saint.
there. And so I love the pieces of it, because if it wasn't for the Bible, I wouldn't have had a thirst and a love for God
Yeah.
that was kept, it kept me looking for the experience that really the course answered a lot of the questions, but I had to let go of the course. I had
Yeah.
to let go of the course to find the answer of awakening.
As the course tells you to, right?
Yes, yes. Yes, it's a remarkable experience, and I like the way you're describing. It's almost like you start here, you make a big round robin all the way
Mhm.
around these other traditions, and you end up back here with an understanding.
Yeah. What's that? I'm thinking of that Zen koan. It's like gone to the other side of the shore upon leaving, upon having never left, or something like that.
Yeah,
It's like you
yeah,
come full circle and realize, oh, I've always been that. I've always been here. I just couldn't see it.
yeah, yeah. There's you mentioned a piece. I'm not sure where the piece of meditation fits in. Which piece does the meditation fit in? Is that bhakti? Is that a form
Raja.
of bhakti? Raja.
Yeah.
And how would you describe a typical meditation? Are you a meditator?
Oh, yes. Yeah. My practice for meditation has evolved a lot as my journey has evolved. Initially, it was the traditional a mantra meditation or breath work meditation, just trying to still the mind. The idea is, the lesson's called the silent I is the real I, because whatever sense of I there is that's making effort isn't the real thing yet. And so, in the Raja yogis will try to realize the self by basically becoming pure silence. And in that silence, the recognition of God as God is there. So the purpose of Raja is to still the mind through long sessions of intense meditation and concentration that eventually will lead to the silence of the self. But as Ramana pointed out again, you can never meditate yourself out of being the meditator. So you have to get rid of the idea of I am meditating to achieve realization. Even that has to be abandoned. And it's a good thing in the beginning, right? It's like the canoe that you take to get across the other side of the river. But once you get across the river, you leave the canoe and you go on to the shore.
Yeah.
So eventually we leave that canoe of even the meditator itself must be annihilated and only the self remains.
Yes. Well, I really like hearing your understanding of these ideas, and your application feels like that you're providing a pointer for others to realize for themselves that they can have this direct experience as
Yep.
well. And tell me, Aaron, how does how Christians have this practice? I became a pretty good prayer, what I would call I used to call a prayer warrior,
Yep. Yep.
warrior. And prayer takes on a whole different meaning in A Course in Miracles. There's a pamphlet that's in the course that's very good called A Song of Prayer.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, what does Advaita teach about prayer, and how does that relate to any of the topics that we're talking about, any of the yogas? How does prayer fit into that?
Well, I think the connecting piece would be just kind of mysticism itself, because I don't believe Advaita talks about prayer very much, if at all, in the Vedas or the sutras or whatever. Prayer is sort of uniquely a Western or Christian tradition, but the mystics, the Christian mystics, really I think got prayer right, which is just an act of achieving union with God. So in Christianity, the way I grew up, it was reciting your laundry list of needs, becoming a beggar before God. And the mystics very much renounced this idea. They're like, get that nasty, what would they call it? Carnal nature. Get that carnal nature out of the equation. God is not a laundry list of personal desires. You'll never realize God this way. But the mystics practice contemplative prayer. And when I was a young teenager, I just became obsessed with the Christian mystics, because they just had something I was looking for, and that I felt like I wasn't getting from church, which was a little more of the understanding of God as the self. The mystics had this idea back in the dark ages, and I've heard Eckhart say this, but in those days, that was maybe the worst time in human history. In the basically in Europe in the Dark Ages, there's wars, genocide, disease, famine, starvation, the Inquisition, just unbelievable persecution. Like we think it might be bad now in America. This is like Disneyland compared to back then. Like you
Yeah.
weren't allowed to have any beliefs. Even if you were Orthodox and you got a belief wrong, you could be stoned on the spot. So it was like this hyper obsession with dogma. And so in that really chaotic, low vibrational world, these monks, these Christian mystics, were forced to seek God inwardly, because the religious rituals that were the only form of spirituality that existed back then were so dead and void of God that if any soul had a true hunger for God, it'd be very clear very quickly, you're not going to find God this way. This way is more separation, more suffering, more death, but God must be within the self. And so they would do contemplative prayer, which was really just meditation. But I think maybe the best book you could read is The Cloud of Unknowing, which is by an unknown author who didn't want to take credit for the work, very mystical of them. And they talked about this cloud of unknowing, which is where we meditate upon God. Let your love, let your devotion, let your longing for the divine take you to this great cloud of unknowing. We call it the void now, maybe. And once you're in that place, just rest in silence. Let God reveal itself to you. God is not a thing to be attained, but it's a merging of true love, like two lovers on their wedding night, consummating that union. Like that's the way we realize God. So for the mystics, prayer was that contemplative act of working up your longing for God and worship of God in prayer. My beloved, my dear, show me who you are. Show me thy face, O Lord. And then when that burning desire to know God gets so intense, you just melt into it and disappear basically into that great cloud. So my prayer at 14 years old, I started doing this. I remember reading a book by Jian Guyan called Experiencing the Depths of Jesus Christ. And it was like my new Bible or something, because I experienced Christ in the Bible this way, where something about this man, Christ, it wasn't that he was the savior who died for my sins and took my beating from angry stepdad. It was like he had an experience of God that I wanted. Like as worshipful as Christ was, that's not what inspired Christ, right? He was what he was because he knew I and the Father are one.
Yeah.
Not because he prayed the sinner's prayer and accepted himself into his own heart, right? So that became my prayer practice after reading the mystics. And I abandoned it for a while when I went deep into Eastern philosophy, but really just since getting really deep into ACIM and in the past year or so, I've sort of taken up prayer as a practice again. And I absolutely love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Prayer has so many different facets to it. It's definitely not the old-fashioned Christian practice that I used to have, which is similar to what you're describing. And like when Lisa and I, we love to pray and bless our food. We use it for a time of blessing because we are what God is. We are the incarnate expression of God, reflection of God. And so when we bring these things into our time of prayer, we do it every day before we eat. One of us prays and we just bless everything. We bring everything in. There's no good or bad in that space. There's no right or wrong. But we bring our thoughts, our feelings, our ideas of the day into that space of holiness, blessing it, and just acknowledging all things are what God is. All things are welcome in this space. And so that's a form of prayer that we kind of use. But I also think that prayer is, as you said, it's a meditation. It's a transmission of I am to I am. It's self to self transmission. And that's, it's a visceral experience. How would you say that your experience is with all of I just love the bandwidth that you speak from, Aaron. It's very understanding. It's broad, and it has clarity connected to it in a direct experience. How would you describe your life difference today versus as a youth pastor as you were awakening?
That's a good question. It's almost different in every conceivable way. At 23, I had the understanding I don't believe in this God anymore through working at a very fundamentalist church. And so I had a bit of a dark night of the soul. I kind of became a closet atheist for a while because my conception of God was so Christian that when I saw clearly that there's no possible way that this God exists. If I know one thing in this universe, it is that your God does not exist. Like that's where I was when I left Christianity.
Yeah.
But then it was like, but then what is God? Or is there a God? And
Yeah.
it took a while for me to find a new framework of God, which really is a non-dual framework, because my framework was so dualistic. I am separate from God. I do the right things and he lets me into heaven. This idea was so incredibly limiting that it took a while to rewire the circuitry. But through that intense pursuit of like, I felt like I'd lost my great love, the one thing in my life that I could identify with. I am Aaron, I am a Christian, was like taken from out underneath me. And I had this identity crisis, which caused me to do this intense spiritual seeking. And then that led me to, at 27, have this really, really profound sort of spiritual awakening experience that left me very much in like a samadhi state for 2 weeks. And coming out of that, I had had full proof beyond any shadow of a doubt that state, that I knew this must be the state Christ was in. There's no way this wasn't Christ's experience. That state is absolutely real and absolutely available. There's no ability to deny it anymore. I had a free sample of it for 2 weeks. So now my whole life became devoted to how do I get back there? And it's just amazing the way that God worked it out, because it's like he put me at the top of the mountain or something so I could look down and see all the paths. It's like I had 20 seconds to take in the view, right? And then flash, I'm back down at the bottom of the mountain, back in my suffering and my depression. But I was like, okay, well, I remember what it was like. There was a road and a path and a rock here and a rock there. And I just began climbing that mountain. And, have I reached the top of the mountain? I have no idea. Those questions to me are meaningless and useless because, people will say, well, because you had that experience, are you enlightened now? And it's always like, if I was, I would have no clue. Like tomorrow, something could happen to me that triggers that old person and I could get lost in ego again and suffer. That's totally possible. I have no idea. All I know now is I have this unbelievable abiding peace that never leaves me, that is a causeless peace. There's nothing at all I can point to. That's the reason for having it. There is this immense outpouring of love for every person I see, very much the way ACIM describes it. And it just seems to deepen every day. And I'm so lost in it and enjoying it that all those questions don't bother me anymore. They don't concern me anymore. But they were the questions that led me to that place that fueled my seeking journey. Was I want liberation, I want freedom with all of my heart. And eventually you just, again, you melt into that love, and even ideas of salvation and freedom don't matter to you because all that matters is the beloved. So that's kind of where I'm at now. And, I never could have imagined being where I am today 5 years ago when I was lost in depression. I was so hopeless about my life, and in seemingly just the flash of an instant, everything has changed. And I sort of describe it like falling asleep at night. It's like, Aaron, when was the moment you got free of all that suffering? Is sort of like asking, when was the moment you fell asleep last night? It's like, I don't know, but it happened slowly and then all at once,
Yeah. And I would say that you could almost say that that's really a true born again experience.
Absolutely.
That in my mind, I think it's a born again experience. You could call it a resurrection, because it's a resurrection of the body mind, of the carnal mind into the spirit. It's not different than I commend my spirit. When Jesus, these are words that he was said to say, that I commend my spirit to the Father, and we do that in order to have this. I feel you can speak on this, but I feel in order to have this direct experience, those parables that Jesus gave 2,000 years ago, that the kingdom of heaven is like a man who who found treasure on a piece of land, and went and sold everything that he had so that he could buy that piece of land, right?
Yes.
So you have to want nothing more, and then the everything that you've always wanted, and it's not money. It's not relationships. It's not things or status or attributes. It's like all of a sudden you have this connected love of what God is.
Yes. That is absolutely the only way to achieve it, is that one pointed desire for it. Sometimes I'll say that, and this is the grace point of suffering. This is what suffering does to us, is it works the soil, it softens the soil so that that seed is ready to go down and be planted like Christ said, and actually produce that fruit. If the soil is too shallow or too hard and dense, then some suffering is needed to soften the heart, because the grace point of suffering is that it proves to you that there is no fulfillment in the material world anywhere. In fact, all pursuit of fulfillment in the world leads to pain and misery. And you get to this point when you really follow your suffering. Like, this is really kind of the path of karma yoga. It's like, okay, I feel like that Ferrari is going to be my salvation. Then I'll truly be happy. All right, let's see if that's true. I'm going to save up. I'm going to buy the Ferrari. But do it with the awareness. Let's find out if this really does fulfill me. That's the only difference between a yogi and a person who's not a yogi, is that the normal person doesn't ask those questions. They just fully believe the Ferrari will make me happy. And when it doesn't, rather than having the recognition of, oh, this doesn't have salvation in it, there's this depression, this hopelessness that sets in, and we get more cynical and bitter. Whereas if you go into those experiences, give yourself that experience. Is there salvation in money? Is there salvation in fame? Let's find out. Pursue those things with all of your heart, right? Let that be your bhakti. And when you get the thing, ask the question, okay, am I fulfilled? Am I in nirvana now? And every time you'll see, no, I'm just as miserable as ever, maybe a little bit more. So what does that tell me? At some point, we need to do that about face and turn away from the world of objects towards the subject, towards the self.
Yep.
And you have to get to this point where all the worldly pleasures could be laid at your feet. Aaron, here's all the most beautiful women in the world, all the money, all the fame, every fast car, you name it. And it's like, I spit on your worldly pleasures. I want nothing to do with them. All I want is God. When you get to that point, you will achieve liberation. I mean, that is liberation. It is the total detachment from the world. And what happens is the world does this flip, this reversal on you, where it was this cold, dead, cruel place. And when you abandoned it and renounced it completely, and God became your singular desire, all of a sudden the doors flip and God is shining in everything. And that's what ACIM describes as the vision of Christ. It's like, you can't imagine how the world will sparkle with love and joy as soon as your vision becomes the vision of Christ.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it is amazing, and I love the way you express that. I guess you could say awakening or having this self-realization. It is a gradual thing. It's not something that you arrive to. It it becomes a new experience that suddenly it goes from concepts to, oh my God, I'm living this experience.
Yeah, experiences.
Yeah, you're living the experience that you've been reading about,
Yeah.
and everything becomes a witness to the truth of what you are, of what you discover.
Yes.
It's such a beautiful. I'm so grateful and also I'm to speak to another, to speak to you or other students or other traditions, people that are on the path that have found this. And it's not just A Course in Miracles. It's not just Advaita Vedanta. It's not Christian mysticism or science of mind. It's all of those things.
Yeah.
It's all of those things. It's one huge big matrix of what God is, and then you find that everything is what God is, and that's the experience that unfolds, and that's where those descriptives that are in the course that talk about what enlightenment is, it's where you're more calm, you're more gentle.
Yeah. Tranquility.
Yeah. And you're more gentle on yourself and others, and the mind, the body mind, or the ego that really was important to bring you to this point, it's less and less important.
Mhm. Yeah, it was just a tool all along, like a hammer and a chisel. The statue of David being created. It's like you don't despise the hammer and chisel once you've made the statue, but you don't need the hammer and chisel once you've made the statue.
Yeah. Yeah. So this month that we're going to spend with you in the presenter series is going to be a weekly deliverable, and you're going to give a live presentation each week, right?
Yes, I believe the are the sessions 1 hour,
Yep, yep, they're one
60 minutes.
hour.
So we'll do maybe 45 minutes of teaching, maybe 20, 15, 20 minutes of Q&A, and I'll have a worksheet to give. Basically, each week is going to be teaching what the practices for that week. I'll give you a worksheet that gives you some practices, and you just spend that week completely doing Raja Yoga in week 1. Week 2, you're doing all Karma Yoga. Week 3, Bhakti. Week 4, Jnana. And the idea behind it is that everyone's wired a little bit differently, right? People have different passions and tendencies and all of that. And so it's like find whichever path resonates with you the most. You might do all 4 of them, and the path of Bhakti just makes your spirit sing. It's like, okay, there's your path. Take the Bhakti path. Maybe Raja did it for you. But hopefully people taking this course will find some spark that they can take with them and take as their practice after the series is over.
Yeah. That's really cool. And the thing that is really special about the presenter series this year, Aaron, you weren't with us in it last year, but the thing that we moved to this year are the live presentations where the audience, they get to connect with you. They get to really be in the same room with you.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that Lisa, I see that she's with us online right now. She's the presenter for January, and one of the things that people are really loving about the presenter series this year that they didn't have before is having that teacher that's right there with them every week,
Yeah.
and having a variety of teachers is really great.
Oh yeah.
So there was a little bit, there were a few people asking questions about the book you were mentioning. What was it? Was it something?
I believe it was The Cloud of Unknowing.
The Cloud of Unknowing, right, right,
Yeah. There's no author, but you'll find it on Amazon.
right. Okay. And what about getting, is there anything that someone would read ahead of time or to kind of look into for these ideas of yoga that you're describing? Is there any one book that would sort of open up their mind to some of the terms that are used?
It's totally not necessary because it will be very much beginner oriented, with the assumption that people taking this course probably haven't even heard of these yogas or practiced them, and that's totally fine. We're not even going to be going very deep into the yogas themselves, but just the kind of the basic tenets and philosophies of that yoga. And then how can we intertwine that with self-inquiry to use that variation of practicing to eliminate the false I. So all 4 have the exact same objective, which is Ramana Maharshi's practice of self-inquiry, and just different angles on that. So if you wanted to read a book to get a bit familiar with self-inquiry, there is Be As You Are, talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. You can buy that on Kindle. I believe Who Am I was actually Ramana's book on self-inquiry. I don't know if I'm sure it's on Amazon. It's a very short book. You can also hear them on YouTube. There's some recorded voice, like audio books that will recite the book as well for free. So a couple of options there.
Mhm. Cool. And someone is asking, what was the name of that book that you read as a teenager? The
Ah,
name, the Jesus book?
yeah, it's by a 17th century mystic, Madame Jeanne Guyon. The book is called Experiencing the Depths of Jesus Christ. So it's very Christian language heavy, but again, just like ACIM, if you can read it, understanding these words are just pointers, you will get so much out of that book. It's really a bhakti yoga book for sure, but through the Christian mystical lens.
Cool. Wow. Well, this is going to be a great month, and I look forward to spending this time with you on it. What would you say is what would you say is someone's a preparation? How would you point someone into a preparation to receive some of these ideas that we're talking about, or even to open their understanding, open up their that. How does how does that work where we make that full-on connection with with the truth that brings it in the clarity that you have described?
Great question. I would always direct people to self-inquiry. It is the practice of all spiritual practices, and even to call it a practice to me is even a limitation on it. It's really something that is a natural stage of the seeking journey, where again we become a bit disenfranchised from the practices, the world of objects and rituals, and there is that inward movement where we begin becoming curious about the subject or the I who does the practice. And that question, who am I, is born in you. All spiritual practices are for the purpose of leading you to the birth of that question. And that's where true self-inquiry begins. So anyone can start there, and you can really almost in a sense skip a lot of the monopoly board, so to speak, by just knowing, okay, this is the ultimate question to be asked. Who am I? Just go right there
Yeah.
and ask that question. Just become curious like a child. What is the source of this I am? Everyone has this knowledge. I am, I. We all say I. Find out where I arises from. That's self-inquiry. When you're washing the dishes, who is washing the dishes? Investigate, ask the question. And what happens is there's a bit of a momentum that's gained where the question takes on a life of its own and begins asking itself. And you become so curious to know, what is the nature of I? What is this I who's witnessing, who's observing, who is aware? All of a sudden that question just burns up all other questions. And that's strap in your seatbelt, you're on the fast track, right? So you
Yeah.
can begin doing that even right now after this session is over, just innocently, without a lot of effort, or like, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do self-inquiry. You don't need that, right? Just become curious and just ask the question and then let it go. And if the question lands anywhere real in you, it will reappear again throughout the day. And when it appears, just, wow, who am I? And keep that childlike innocence about it. And again, the wheels will start turning on their own.
Yeah. 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 Thank you. Would you say that, I have noticed that when someone mentions a book, or even following the course, following one of the other the writings of Ramana or Nisargadatta or Yogananda, any of those, we can get so caught up in wanting to read, because I think the ego thinks
Right.
that it's going to wake up, it's going to find
Oh, yeah.
enlightenment by reading more books.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I feel that the ideas that you're presenting, especially the idea of self-inquiry, the idea of asking, who is the I, and what is it that is aware of this experience? Discover the self I am, and then from that place, that's where self-discovery I'm going to be in on that bhakti thing with you, because I want to go back. I want to see how this 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 pastor's son, evangelical, that's kind of mixed himself in a pot of Advaita Vedanta, Hinduism, and all of these amazing traditions. How does that feel at the end of the day? Because
Yeah.
the bhakti side of A Course in Miracles and the bhakti side. Now, when I went to live with Muji for a while, we did a lot of things that they called bhajans. We had
Mm.
bhajans, and oh my God, it was like it was like a church service of charismatics on
Yeah.
steroids.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in that way, there's a lot of devotion. There's a lot of connectedness, and I think that's definitely a form of worship. And when you have an understanding that you're worshiping the oneness that everything is, and not some God that's out there, or
Yeah.
some Jesus that's out there, or the Holy Spirit. When you recognize that you are the presence of I am, and everything else is that as well, then you're not worshiping something. You're engaged in just being in love with God.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a line I love from the Ashkrava Gita that says something like, just as the sea foam and the bubbles are not separate from the ocean, so everything that appears is not separate from the self, all the way from the Parabrahman, the supreme self, down to the blade of grass. The self-luminous consciousness is shining through it. And so you can literally have an experience looking at the grass when you have this vision of Christ, as the Course says. A blade of grass can just mesmerize you with wonder. You see God in everything.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, I'm gonna share with our audience just a minute. I'm gonna just share a little bit of a preview of what Evolve is about, so that you guys that are watching can check this out. So right now, if you look on your screen, you'll see that we have Evolve. It's a global community for spiritual awakening, and this is what Aaron's going to be involved in the presenter series in February. He's our month two, our February presenter. Lisa Natoli right now is in January. And this is our lineup for the year. We've got a great lineup of teachers that will be joining with all of you, and you're welcome to come and join us at the in Evolve. And it gives you just sort of a description of what each speaker is going to talk about. Then we have TGF TV, which is this program, and each of our TGF TV hosts, Lisa is one, I am one. Kelly Russell is one of our hosts for TGF TV. Susan Telford is one of our hosts. And then Cindy Krupp, she is our project manager of our Living in Oneness program. And she is the fifth Friday of the month. Every time we have a fifth Friday, she talks about living in oneness. And she brings in someone that's in the Living in Oneness program, so they can sort of talk about what their direct experience is. But this is Evolve Community, and I'd love to have if anyone is interested, I will put the button to check this page out on the board. Let me just do that here, and then I'll do it over on YouTube for you guys. And Aaron, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. This has been extraordinary and a blessing for all of us. And I can't wait not only to have you in the presenter series, but also we get to have you in the conference that's coming up, the Awareness Conference. Hold the date for April 16, 17, and 18. It's a whole
Okay.
weekend of 30 presenters, and it's free. You get free tickets for 24 hours, so everyone is invited to be part of that. And it's 24 hours from each day. So you'll get to go to every single event and be our guest with that. So Aaron, thank you for being here. I love you, man. You're awesome. And I can't wait to see you in the presenter series.
Thank you again so much, Bill, for having me. It's been a blast, and looking forward to seeing you all there next month.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining with us. And we'll see you next week for TGF TV. And check out the Evolve, the TGF TV, and the presenter series. Check out Lisa Natoli. All right. Bye, everyone. We'll see
Bye,
you
guys.
next week. Thank you, Aaron. Bye-bye.